Welcome back to Fast Money. The Bitcoin blues continue. Take a look at this chart. Bitcoin getting just wrecked this week, falling below 8,000, making that 3 straight weeks of losses, the longest losing streak since September 2017. But our next guest says traders are selling the wrong coins. Let's bring in Spencer Bogart, a blockchain capital partner. He's coming to us from San Francisco. Spencer, great to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So the one coin out there you say is still a buy is Bitcoin. Why? And let me ask you this, too, because obviously you're speaking your book, so to speak. Is there any situation in which you would tell us that Bitcoin is not a buy?
There you go.
I think it's mostly going to be a few years out. I mean, listen, if the story erodes and it's not there, then I'm not going to be bullish on Bitcoin, right? But the long-term thesis is very much intact. I mean, as for what's going to happen over the next couple of days, I don't know. But when I look out over the next year, 2 years, I mean, the story is very much materializing. Right? So the institutionalization of Bitcoin is absolutely occurring. That was very evident, I think, to anybody that was circulating around Blockchain Week in New York. Every major bank is trying to do something in the space. Either they're going to be offering Bitcoin to their clients, they're working on a custody platform, or they're opening up a trading desk. So that's absolutely taking place. And then on the other side, again, there's currency crises happening on a regular basis around the world. So while we're pretty comfortable using the US dollar on a daily basis and it works well, guess what? Next year, there's going to be more currency crises. There's a few this year, and that continues.
So if you're optimistic about the use cases and you cite these major banks building things on various platforms, I mean, those platforms are Ethereum, they're Ripple, they're Stellar. Those are in your hold categories amongst the crypto. I mean, longer term, do you like these coins? Because it seems like you're most bullish the use cases for these particular platforms.
So I don't think necessarily any of the things that banks are doing are necessarily built on top of those platforms. I think largely it'll be offering some of those crypto assets to their clients. You know, I think longer term, again, I would put most of the coins that are probably in the like number 2 to number 7 range just as a neutral, just saying that, hey, listen, these could be going up significantly, but they also have significant headwind, right? Especially something like Ethereum, which again, I'm very constructive on a long-term basis. But it has a lot of overhang because there's a lot of tokens. A lot of these ICOs have been built on top of Ethereum. And I think a lot of those tokens are overvalued. And ETH itself, the token of the Ethereum network, is used essentially as fuel to invest into these ICOs. So I think that'll present some headwinds to something like Ethereum.
Hey, Spencer, so I've heard a couple times this year, or actually on many occasions this year, that if you've been in Bitcoin for years, okay, at least 5 or 6 years, you've seen 50, 60% sell-offs fairly routinely, at least once a year, that sort of thing. Is it different this time because the market cap is so much greater and there's so many more eyeballs on it?
That's a great question. I'll tell you what's very different this time. In the past years when we've had these kind of drawdowns, and I've talked to people within the industry, media, everyone has kind of had this question of, is this the end of Bitcoin? And this is the first downturn where when I've tried to explain to people, hey, listen, Bitcoin's not going away, it's going to keep on keeping on, it was the first time that everybody's response was, no, of course, we know that. We know Bitcoin's not going away. And to me, that's a huge change.
Hey, Spencer, it's Tim. I bet if you took the top 10 coins, you'd probably look at over the last month and have them all be down within, you know, plus or minus 5% of each other. In other words, I think the whole asset class is trading together. What's the argument here that relative value really works? I'm not sure it does.
I won't be the one that's going to make an argument that relative valuation makes sense in a giant bull market. Listen, that was what got us into a lot of trouble in the dot-com boom, and I think it's what's getting a lot of people into trouble here with this kind of ICO boom that happened in late 2017, early 2018. So, I mean, I think that even Bitcoin could face some headwinds here. Again, my horizon here, I'm talking about things, my minimum horizon is at least a year, right? So could Bitcoin trade lower? Certainly. But do I think it'll be higher a year from now? Absolutely.
You know, Dan had mentioned the notion of this time perhaps may be different this time around, and I'm always leery of saying that about anything. But, you know, this time around we do have futures, and it does seem to coincide with that top in Bitcoin that we saw in December. Do you think that that is playing a role in Bitcoin not bouncing back as sharply as it may have had in the past? Or do you think that sharp bounce back is still to come even with a deeper market because of the futures markets?
I don't know about a sharp bounce back, but I do think it'll materialize. And I do think the futures markets and having deeper institutionalization of Bitcoin is overall positive. But listen, again, I think going back to our dot-com analogy again, you had a lot of people betting the farm on what is the next big dot-com. And I think we've seen a lot of people doing the same thing with a lot of these tokens and these ICOs. And that's a dangerous game. Please don't do that. Most of them are over-promising and under-delivering. Meanwhile, you have a few that are still kind of excelling at their use cases, Bitcoin being one of them.
So what's your target now, Spencer?
Honestly, I don't publish price targets anymore, but listen, I'd say I would bet that Bitcoin at least ends above 10K in the year.
All right, Spencer, thank you. Spencer Bogart, always good to speak with him.
Thanks so much.
Dan.
You totally bogarted that interview. I'm going to tell you that right now.
You know what that means?
No, I don't.
It means you stole it.
Oh.
Took the whole thing.
Crushed it.
All for yourself.
Let me ask you this, though. There is always a comparison to the internet boom and bust.
Yeah.
Is Bitcoin Yahoo? Or is Bitcoin Google?
I don't think so. I think that when you think about, like, Bitcoin and the use cases, it's got the biggest network effect, right? So think of it almost as a platform, and think of the stuff like the Lightning Network that's being built out. And Jack Dorsey just invested $25 million. That's to speed up the transactions. That's to make them cheaper, that sort of thing. So to me, I think it is very different. I'll just make the case here with Bitcoin. This week alone, we've seen like Coinbase already announce all of these institutional custodian products and this and that. When the institutions finally get more clarity on regulatory framework, I think the infrastructure is going to be there. And then that goes back to your question about futures. That's been vol dampening. That's probably not a bad thing that Bitcoin is not back above 15,000 or something like that. So I think once the demand comes back, there's going to be infrastructure. And then if there's clarity around regulation, that could set up the next real bull trade for Bitcoin.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. But he mentioned Ether, and Ether being sort of like a hold for him for a little bit. I look at it and say he claims that a lot of those tokens are overvalued. I think the regulation has pushed those coins to a limit lower where they shouldn't be traded. Actually could be undervalued, in my opinion, in a lot of cases. The ones that are actually, consumer utility tokens. And I think there's a lot of them on the Ethereum platform. So I would be buying Ethereum here if I had to make a bet as far as putting some capital to work.
Muffin, onion ring, planaba, mush potato, cups, magno, fish, shrimp, orange juice, spagooter, tartar tooth, Charlotte barf, Brussels sprouts, broken double cheeseburger, aquadad, spaghetti and marbles, food, ice cream, bicycle, Cyril, Mark,